Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Matthew Terry, founder and CEO of Suade, and welcome to People in Sales, not salespeople, where we analyze the person behind the salesperson. And today I'm very excited to introduce Naveed, founder of Dollar, new friend and supporter of mine. And he has held a ton of different powerful roles as a data science project manager, head of data science, and I am super excited to have him on the show. Naveed, how are you doing?
I'm good, Matt. Thanks for having me, man. It's exciting to be here. I've seen some of your other guests, and I was like, I don't know if I fit here.
You definitely fit, man, because you are a founder, and founders, they're salespeople or people in sales, man. And super excited to have you on. I want to talk about Dollar and your experience with Dollar, and dive into the background there. Tell us why Dollar exists.
So it's dollar like dollar bills, y'all.
Okay.
Because we get people money. That's what we do. The vision is to build a world that's happier and wealthier, and we found that a big component that was holding people back was their student loans. And we can talk a bunch about why student loans and why money. Some people might think maybe it's financial education, maybe it's something else. But we found that it really comes down to just money.
So tell me a little bit more about that, if you can.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Do you have student loans?
I do have student loans.
How do you think about them?
I don't like them at all because I have to pay every single month.
Yeah, I mean, and that's coming out of like a 3.5 year hiatus, right? Like where if you have federal loans, then you probably didn't make any payments,
Mhm.
and you don't think about them, which doesn't mean that you don't know that they exist, that they're important, that you have to pay them off. It just has this like negative feeling associated with it, right?
Exactly.
Why do you think that is?
It's just another thing I got to pay, and I don't really associate the value that the degree had or the degree gave me towards the money I'm paying now.
That is so sad, right? It's like if you think about it, there's nothing more valuable in education in the world, um, and we're collectively looking at it as this thing with lower perceived value because of the impact it has on our lives, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you think? What do you think some things you would do if you didn't have student loans?
With the money, I mean, not having to spend $200 a month is uh is nice. It would just be nice. Now, with the money, I would continue to save and be able to support, myself and the vacations potentially I want to take and other things I want to buy with that. But it's more of the losing the money aspect every single month that just has me, you know, been in an unfortunate mind state.
Yeah, it sounds super interesting here, man. I'm interviewing you now, so this is cool, right? Like you mentioned that you feel like you're losing money,
Mhm.
and it seems that vacations or like have experiencing life in a different way is a top item on your priority list. You also mentioned savings. So
Mhm.
how are you thinking about that? Like where does your most of your money go? I mean, we're founders, right? So we don't have too much money. But when you think about money, where do you
Yeah.
think what aspects of your financial life do you think are doing you good and what are not? And if there's something's holding you back, why do you think that is?
Yeah, financial aspects that are doing me well. It's always good to be a good steward of your money, and to have the basics down, like rent, food, and healthcare, etc. Right? And then when it comes to savings, it's always good to have a little cushion just in case life does you wrong. So you want to be a good steward of your money, and that's why it's important to save. Um, and what student loans don't allow me to do is save up that money, right? Save up the $200, $300 that I'll be spending every single month. There's a second part of your question that I'm escaping. That's escaping my brain, but if that helps you, then yes.
Yeah, no, I mean it is super interesting. So let me like the different take here is why didn't you just borrow money from your parents or your family
Oh, yeah. To pay student loans or to just
to live a better life, buy
to
a
live a
house,
better life?
buy
Yeah,
a car?
yeah. I mean, I don't want to ask them. It feel a little strange, but you're not wrong, right? To take a vacation, I could just ask someone for the money.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And the reason I'm not being serious with that question, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not a serious question. But the reason I ask it is that a lot of times we run into people who think about it from that perspective, right? Like they may be coming from a bit of a more privileged background, and they may have kids that have student loans, and they say, you know what, like my kid pays their student loans off, and I don't help them with that. They're self-sufficient, blah blah blah. Why should like these other people who are having difficulties? They're obviously stupid because they're not managing their finances well, or they're lazy, or they have they're entitled. They feel like they deserve some forgiveness or something like that. And it turns out that there's a big difference in the lived experience of people who are not coming from that kind of a background, right? So I'll give you an example, and this is by studies done by a very prominent social scientist, like a social psychologist, and she found that there is a big gap in wealth between people of color and people who are not. Um, and wealth, right? Like the wealth gap is about 10x higher than the earnings gap, which is crazy, right? Like the earnings gap might be closing, but the wealth gap is growing. And it turns out it's because even a small bit of community, right, makes a big difference. And I'm not talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? I'm not talking about people who are ultra wealthy. I'm talking about parents being able to afford to pay, car insurance on your first car, or help you out with a $10,000 down payment on your first home. Those small amounts of money, right? Like they're relatively small amounts of money, end up making such a big difference to the overall trajectory in terms of wealth accumulation,
Mhm.
uh, that there is no comparison, right? So you might have somebody who has done all the right things, who has gone to school, got the jobs, is doing their best to be financially prudent, and is still behind. And for us, when we look at that person, we find that they usually have student loans, and those student loans are a big part of that struggle. And
Yeah.
so there's this inverted sort of counterintuitive mechanism, that happens where people disassociate value from education, and they're like, why did I do this? I could have done something else.
Mhm.
Why did I take out so many loans? Everybody said you go to college, you do all of the things, and you'll be successful. And on paper, I might be successful, but in reality, I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm constantly struggling. I'm constantly trying to do things. Everybody's telling me that I need to budget better. I need to eat ramen noodles, or don't buy my avocado toast, or don't have my Starbucks coffee. And that's a bunch of BS, right? Like, because we have realized. So I don't know. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. Is
Mhm.
I grew up seeing my parents, my friends' parents. They would save for years to do one thing, and and then when they would do the thing, eventually when they would have enough funds to, and they'd take the leap, like, you know what? Yeah, now we're gonna go spend this money that we've saved for over like however many years. They didn't enjoy it.
Hmm.
It felt bad, right? They felt guilty, and they weren't able to really like experience the moment, and they would justify it, say, oh, we're doing this for the kids, or like, it would end up being not a pleasant experience as they had envisioned all those years as they were saving. They had this idea that this vacation or whatever is going to be fantastic,
Mhm.
and I think that a lot of people experience that. And so when people talk about millennials or Gen Z is a bit different, but for especially for millennials, uh, like, oh, these people, they're not serious, they're not saving, they're not doing whatever. Well, there is an aspect here. We don't want to live the lives that our parents lived, right? Like, we don't want to sit here and like suffer for 10 years to just experience one small thing. We
Mhm.
want to we want to have a good life. We want to experience life, and having a good life doesn't mean blowing a bunch of money, right? Like,
Exactly. Have a ton
it
of
means
money.
experiencing things.
Mhm.
And so um, there's that slight difference there. And so when we speak with people about their student loans or how they look at their finances, you have this incredible disassociation between value and price.
Mhm.
And in many ways they're right? Like, there's a big disparity between the cost of higher education, and
The amount of money we can obtain from the actual degree itself.
yeah, the return on investment, right? Like, now look, don't get me wrong, it's still like a couple 100% return on investment in the lifetime, right? but it doesn't feel like that. And it's much, much lower than it used to be. So, as an example, somebody who went to school in the 70s, inflation adjusted their tuition total cost is 11K, right? And you compare that to the average cost today is like about 30K, right? Which is triple the
Mhm.
amount. And so it's not just an inflation thing; it's also definitely something else. Okay, so to go back to your question, is we found that student loans were a barrier to success for many people, especially people who didn't come from backgrounds where they could get some support from their parents.
Mhm.
And typically, in many instances, when people feel embarrassed to ask or think twice before asking, it means that there's a reason for that, right? And it's not usually ego; it's usually burden. Like you don't want to put this burden on your parents or your family because you understand that they're experiencing their own struggles.
Mhm.
Um, and so we uh, we looked at that, and we took all of the things that you might hear about people with student loans, right? And I've mentioned some of them. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're not financially savvy.
Mhm.
Maybe they're not working hard enough. If they just got a better job, right?
Right.
uh, and it's a shame that that's the case. But when you go and you talk to people and you realize that none of those things are actually true. Everybody understands that the fastest way out of debt is to pay it off.
Yeah.
Um, they just don't have the money, right? Like that's their biggest barrier is that they just don't have enough money to do that thing.
Mhm.
And this is despite working extra jobs or working extra hours or hustling here and there. Everybody has a side hustle, right? Like everybody's trying to find the extra money so that they can pay off the student loans or save more or try to invest because all of their friends are talking about investments and blah, blah, blah. There's such a difference between perception and reality, right? Like in that sense where it creates this abnormal pressure. And I'm going off on a on a rant
Oh
over
no,
here.
it's good. It's
Yeah,
good. I'm excited for it. Yeah.
yeah. But what happens is that you have a very negative consequence, right? So I'll give you an example. In the late 80s, early 90s,
Mhm.
there was a big push to educate Black communities to say, hey, go to college, like do these things and you will be successful. You will get out of the projects, right? Or whatever, right? Like, so these are very particular Black communities in certain areas.
Mhm.
And it backfired because these folks went to school, they did all the right things, and they found that they weren't making good money at work. They had all of these huge amounts of student debt. In the 90s, it was a terrible situation, right? Like they had to really change up how student loans are managed. There was a big revolution there. Um, and they were looking around and seeing their friends who didn't follow that path who were doing relatively better, right? Even though they may have been doing things that were not,
As technically savvy or,
or maybe even slightly illegal, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
you know and
Okay,
so
okay,
there was
okay.
this huge like gap. Is like I've done everything right, I've done the things, I've done what a society expected me to do, but I'm still here, I'm still in this situation, and I don't see a way for me to break out of it. I'm still scrounging pennies, right? And that's a really bad thing because breaking out should give you that opportunity.
Mhm.
um, and you have a small percentage who would leave, right? They would leave that their communities, go elsewhere, and then try to find success there and look back at the communities like, I'm never going to go back to that place. That's a shithole, right? And that's really bad because then the community continues to struggle and the community doesn't grow. Individuals might grow.
Mhm.
Um, and so you see, like from this perspective, it's like it's not just like, oh, go do the right things and you'll be fine. There's a bigger challenge at play, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why, like, so Black women in particular, they owe about I think that don't quote me on this. I'll confirm with you later. But like I think they owe about 70% more at graduation than their counterparts.
Really.
Crazy, right? Another statistic is folks from the same engineering degree, same school, same everything, applying for jobs towards the end of their college career, right? Undergrad, your senior year, you're applying for jobs. When they come from backgrounds that aren't privileged and they're concerned about money, their confidence going into applying for jobs or applying for jobs where they would actually make the money is so diminished
Yeah.
that it actually has a negative impact on their ability to interview and land those jobs.
Wow.
And this
Yeah.
is science, right? Like people have measured these things. Like, holy crap, dude! Like psychology matters, right? Feeling comfortable and secure enough to say that, yes, I can do this thing, it matters. Um, yeah, and so we recognize all of these things and realize that it's not about the smarts or financial savviness or whatever. Nobody's smarter. Nobody is more financially savvy, right? Like I always like to say that if you have somebody who's trying to figure out whether they're going to pay their electric bill on the first and their gas bill on the 15th, nobody knows their money better than that person. Like they're down to the cent, right? Like they check their bank account multiple times a day. They know everything. Like you tell them about budgeting, they're like, budget with what? Like it has a negative connotation. It's a good thing, right? People should budget. It's a very important thing to do. When you don't have money, budgeting starts meaning other things because you're going to always have to throw off your budget, not because uh, you're being irresponsible, but because that's just circumstance. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
So couple of quick facts. The median salary for somebody who's graduating undergrad today is $65,000 a year.
Okay.
If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which has incredible, like very, very rich data, and you try to calculate at what point does somebody have discretionary income? At what point can they afford to do things outside of the bare minimum, right? That number is 80K.
80K.
$80,000 a year, and we're using the buckets that
Agreed.
the Bureau of Labor Statistics provides, right? They're very conservative in their expenditures, right? Like so, they look, oh, this is what rent should be, this is what person spends on groceries, this is what car insurance is, blah 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 blah. Like they look at the average bucket, and this is for individual, not household, right? Uh, and you don't have the extra money to do these things that all of society expects you to do because you have a college degree now, right?
Right.
Uh, until you're making more than 80K a year, and like earning that extra 15K in salary, how long do you think that takes? It's not, it doesn't happen next year, right?
Oh yeah, it's not a 1 year jump from 65 to 80. Yeah.
Right. And and then especially if you're starting off as like it's just you have to be independent. Your family, your friends, your parents, they can't help you.
Right.
Not because they don't want to, they just can't, right? Like they're not in that position.
Yeah.
So you almost like starting off, it's a very unfair race
Hmm.
from that perspective. And it's people of color, underrepresented communities. So definitely a lot of folks in the Midwest are experiencing this.
Yeah.
Um, and we're like, you know what, like money, money, dollars, man. Like that's what's holding these folks back. Uh, and if you look around, and you might ask yourself, why isn't college free?
Right.
Well, that would solve a big portion of this problem, right? Like, why isn't college free? Well, it turns out that a long time ago, some people decided that a high school education benefits all of society, and so society should foot the bill. And that same group of people said, well, a college education benefits mostly the individual, and so the individual should foot the bill. And that's a bunch of BS, right? Like that's nonsense.
Makes sense.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make it. Maybe for some small sliver of time in the perfect situation that makes sense, but it doesn't in general make sense, right? Like when you look, and there are a couple of ways you can look at this, right? Like so, first of all, the average college graduate earns about $1 million more in their lifetimes than people who don't graduate from college. So
Right.
just from a tax perspective, right, that college educated person is paying more in taxes. And so if your only measure of contributing to society is how much you're paying in taxes, right, or your financial input, then already there's no argument, right? But what's more important is civic engagement, civic involvement.
Hmm.
And you find that people who are college educated are more civically involved in their communities. They're giving time, money, effort because they see the impact that thing had on them, right? Like despite the loans, despite everything, in our hearts we know that college experience, that education was valuable. It
Hmm.
helped us think about things in different ways. It exposed us to different people, right? Um, so that it just doesn't make sense, right? And
Yeah.
so our thesis at the beginning, from the beginning, was that all of society has an incentive to participate in the cost of higher education.
Mhm.
And so that's how dollar started, right? Like, is we looked around and we said, okay, what aspects of society are most obvious? Like, who has the highest levels of incentive to help pay down student loans? And we're not looking for charity, right? We said there's an incentive, there's a mutual benefit involved. And you don't have to think very hard to look at the employer, right? Companies. companies have from the beginning of time have been trying to recruit, to retain, to engage. Like these are problems that have existed from the beginning, right? So from when you were trying to commute, you collect a bunch of people and you want to give them the same sort of goal. Like you have to keep them engaged. You have to make sure that they stick around. You have to find others to do the things if you're successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of how it all started.
Okay. So your target market is companies. How do companies?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. And just give us an overview of how companies help solve this problem.
Yeah, it's a very, very simple. Every month, a company can make a contribution, a direct payment to its employees' student loans. And that does a couple of things, right? So most people will take that contribution as a supplemental payment, right? So they say, okay, my monthly payment is $300. My employer is giving me $100. That's the median amount that we see on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm going to use that $100 as extra money, right? So that means that I will be able to pay down my debt faster because I've paid my minimum. I'm making an extra $100 payment. That's principal. That's going to principal. So it reduces my time to zero debt. I'm paying less in interest, etc.
Right.
Um, we have a smaller percentage of people who use it to offset cost, and so they'll say, you know what, my payment is 300. I will reduce my own payment by $100 and use my employer's contribution to cover the difference, and that
Mm-hmm.
$100 is going to help me buy groceries or do other things, right? Give me some flexibility.
Right.
And that's totally fine. It's a matter of circumstance. And then you have an even smaller group who does one of the two things, but depending on the season.
Hmm.
So maybe during the holidays they reduce their payments.
Right.
Then during other times they may increase. They go back to paying their full minimum, and maybe sometimes even more, because they see the value that that extra cash from the employer has on their overall psychology and view towards their student loans.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's incredible. I love the mission. I love the mission of Dollar. And I want to ask an interesting question. Would you say that your customers are happy? What does churn look like at Dollar?
Yeah, we are very, very proud that we have 100% retention. We have zero churn.
That's incredible, man. That is
Yeah,
that is incredible.
it's
Yeah,
awesome, man.
yeah,
When
yeah.
you build something, it feels special, right? Like when you build something that people actually love, it's a very special feeling.
Hmm. I completely agree. And people love it when they stay on it. And
And that they're giving you money. They're paying you. It's not free.
right, right. And how many customers are you all at right now?
We have just under 50.
Just under 50 customers, complete retention. They're happy.
Yeah,
They're paying you.
they're
And
paying us.
yeah, yeah, which is huge. Okay, so Dollar, this mission to help people honestly get their money back and pay off their student loans a bit quicker is incredible, and it's life changing as you've seen. And in order for you to change these lives, you had to sell, right? You had to sell. And I'm sure you've learned many different things over the years of sales strategies and XYZ to bring in customers, but you actually never held a sales job. So what did you think of sales before starting this startup? I'm curious.
I thought it was easy.
Okay.
I thought sales was easy. I was like, yeah, I mean, come on. Like, I'm a charming guy. I can go out there and and I'm bringing all of this value, right? Like, obviously, I'm going to be so successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was wrong. That was not true because, and like, here's why it was wrong. It was focused on me. Right? I was the hero. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so charming. I'm so awesome. I have all these awesome products. Buy it. And that I think was the biggest mistake that I made in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what did those customer conversations look like when you were just focused on you and your ability to charm and your product?
Well, like you see, it fundamentally, despite that egotistical view, I knew that like what I had was something of value to
Mm-hmm.
others. And so we really focused on the value that offering dollar would help, would add to the team. And so from that perspective, you might say it took a little bit longer for me to realize the ego was getting in the way because we were still successful.
Mm-hmm.
We were still able to sell, right? And here's the thing, right? Like I've always believed that if somebody truly values the thing you've built, they'll pay you. And a lot of the times when you're starting off, it's hard. It's really hard. You've spoken to 50 people. Nobody wants your thing because you don't know how to speak about it properly yet.
Mhm.
And you might end up in the situations where you say, you know what, like let's offer it for free first, and then you justify that by with a bunch of other things, right? You say, oh, we'll learn about it, we'll figure out what they actually want, and then we'll start charging them for it, and blah blah blah. And that's fine. That works in some instances, but the way I look at it is, it's about there's a very slippery slope, thin line, slippery slope between value creation and value extraction, right? And so I think if you're taking this path of starting off free or freemium or whatever, you have to always maintain that it has to be about value creation, right?
Mhm.
And even when you do start charging, you have to make sure that the price, you're not forcing somebody to pay in retrospect for something that you gave them for free. You told them this is free, right? You and I have some thoughts about that, right? But so we charged from day one. We didn't have a product.
Mhm.
It existed like sort of like on paper, right? Like we had some various components here and there, but I've always believed in selling first because I don't know why, right? I just like, first, like, let's see, like, what is somebody going to buy? And then we'll build that thing.
Mhm.
Well, and, we have all of these fantastical ideas and we can try all of these things, sure. But let's go figure out, like, what will somebody actually buy? And so we sold successfully to our first three customers. And
That's all.
then it was like a crazy panic to like, oh shit, now we have to go and like
Actually, go build
build
this
this
thing.
thing. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do like that approach though, because if you spend too much time in the lab, too much time in the shop, you don't know if anyone's gonna buy your thing.
No, and
Right.
we still made big mistakes, right? Like we still made big mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So we launched in January of 21 with our first three customers.
Okay.
And the initial product had a lot of assumptions that just were crap. And they were coming from a good place, right? Like, so we said, and it was the psychology, right? Like we knew we were always going to charge, but we wanted to give somebody the flexibility to maybe to self-serve, uh, to self-initiate
Hmm.
things, right?
Yeah.
And so the thought was, it came from a good place. It said, look, we're in the middle of COVID. We launched in 21, right? Like it's COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty around money. People are concerned, blah blah blah. So we want them to do this good thing for their teams. We know that it's important. We know it's impactful, but we don't want to hold them down in the traditional like contract sense. And so instead, what we'll do is we'll help them sort out all their team, make it very easy for them to come once a month and push a button that says make my contribution. And that
Mm-hmm.
was stupid, man. It was stupid because we've added work for these people.
They had to go in, log in, and press a button.
They had to
It
remember, they had
sounds
to go.
simple, but they had
Yeah.
to remember it, right? Yeah, just like you're saying. Yeah, it's
It
tough.
was awful. And so I would like every month at this around the time, I would get all nervous and panic and be like, oh no, nobody's pushed the button. So emailing people like, hey, like you need to push your button, like everything okay, what's happening? I can push it for you if you like,
Right.
and then like everybody was always like, yeah, just push it for me.
Yeah, shoot.
And
Yeah.
then, I realized like these people aren't interested in this button. Like they just want it to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Don't
And
want
that
to
was
go
a
on
big
the
like,
platform and do anything
yeah,
extra. Just make it
yeah.
recur.
It was yeah, that was I mean it sounds so dumb in retrospect,
Why do we got to do stuff?
Yeah.
That's good though. That's good. That is a good learning. Definitely a good product iteration. But I wanted to go back because you said something interesting that I want to dig into, and it was all around your journey getting to those first three customers, right? And you said you had to iterate on messaging. Talk to me through your first sales strategy, if you would even call it back then. Like, how did you go about getting those customers?
Yeah, it was a very interesting journey, right? So as you know, I come from a very technical background. I studied math all the way to PhD, applied math. I've always sold in one way or the other. I've always been very entrepreneurial in my entire life, and I think it was influenced by my parents. But um, I thought that I needed a person who came from a different background, who was comfortable with selling, who knew how to sell, and so that's the person I recruited. And that's completely fair and it's like completely good to do, right? Well, the mistake I made is that I offset most of the selling them when we didn't really know what we were selling or how to sell it.
Yeah.
Um, and then the second mistake was that we tried to formalize everything too early.
Okay.
When so I'll give you an example, right? Like everybody, and this is like there's so much bad advice out there, right? So we were reading and like trying to do things like, okay, let's experiment, let's freaking A/B test, man, you know. And then as a data scientist, you sit down and you're like, okay, if we want to really A/B test, like what are we testing? And you realize you don't know what you're testing. You don't know what's if you're sending outbound emails, right? Like you don't know what subject lines convert or why. You don't know what the body content should be. Like what is that one thing you're going to change between A/B tests that's going to like be indicative of something important, right? Or something interesting. And so you'd end up with these experiments that were just wildly different.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was one like wasn't really an A/B. And then on top of that, right? Like if you want to do all of these multiple tweaks, right? Because you realize I don't know anything. I'm trying to figure out something. You end up with like I have 40 emails that are completely different from each other.
Right.
If I want this to make sense in any manner, then I need to send these 40 emails to thousands of people. I don't have thousands of people to send these emails to, right?
Yeah.
And so like it becomes a chicken and egg problem. And we thought we were doing it wrong, and we because everybody was like experiment, like blah blah blah, right? And so I think I became allergic at that point to process. I realized that building process too early is like the biggest mistake you can make.
Yeah.
We were doing a really good job on the product side, right? On the product, we were like being very, very lean and frugal. We're like, we're not going to build anything until we sell it. We're not going to build anything new or adjust the way that this thing works because one person maybe had a misunderstanding because the product, like the messaging was maybe not good enough or they didn't understand how it worked. And so when they say they wanted something, you have to dig deeper and understand like, what do you really want, right? But on the sales side, we were doing the opposite. We were trying to build this heavy process, right? Like, this is what funnels should look like, blah blah blah. That was a big mistake. And I think the way we won these first three customers is we really spoke to direct pains that they were having, and we spoke in their language,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we said, hey, we've noticed that in your industry, there's a huge high amount of turnover for this particular type of role. That role just happens to be college educated. And then in the same industry, we got very lucky with our first niche industry, right? Like in that same industry, there was another role that also had like master's level student debt, right? So it's more debt
Mm-hmm.
that were incredibly hard to recruit. There's a national shortage of those people. And so we combined those two things and we said, okay, like let's go and talk to these people about like what they care about, which is making sure that these folks are retained, right? The 80% turnover in the first 3 months is horrible. It doesn't make for a good business, it makes for a very bad experience. And that is a particular driver of the reason it's so hard to recruit this other role, because this other role oversees these roles, right? And they need these people to be consistently doing the things that they're building. It was in the mental health space, right? So they were building these plans for individuals who needed help. And when you don't have a consistent delivery mechanism, right? That would be that person, the high turnover person. Then everything falls apart and you feel frustrated and you don't know why your thing is not working, or it's not a good situation. And that's how we were able to sell the first three customers. Is we spoke completely their languages, addressed their pains, and we told them, look, we don't know for a fact this is going to work, but
The
all
problem
of
is,
the signs point to that, right? They all have student loans. They all complain about their student loans. Right now, like competing on compensation just does a bad idea. You can't afford it.
mhm,
You already have so many costs associated with turnover and recruitment, blah blah blah. You're actually losing money by not giving this a shot.
right. No, that's
And
good. Good pitch. And quickly, how did you even come across that industry was the right industry to go after? Was it
it's
experience,
luck, man.
luck? So
It's
you were
pure
just
luck. Yeah.
all the industries trying to find a niche, and you were like, let's throw a dart on the board. And you,
Well, so we were trying to throw darts on the board, and then my wife is the big reason for a lot of my success.
incredible.
So she had been in this industry in the past, and one day we were just sitting around talking about it,
Mhm.
and the light bulbs went off. I was like, "Whoa, whoa, you're right. We should try this industry for sure." And guess what? Like, I have an expert right here at home who can tell me about like exactly what language to speak, exactly what to say, exactly how to address it. You
Yeah.
know, and that's that it's all my wife.
You had you got the hypothesis from your wife, and you were like, you understood the problem at a high level. Then you had to go in front and talk to people. How did you get in front and talk to those people that you needed
Yeah,
to?
we actually, I think, did a really good job of identifying all. There are about 3,500 of these facilities across the country.
Yeah.
And we were able to just like this is we couldn't have, like, look, man, I don't believe in spending money on things unless like you can show a clear return on it, right? So, oh, get HubSpot or get, pay $500 a month for whatever this tool is that generates you leads, or whatever. That's like, nah, man, we don't know how those, like, we have to have a deep understanding of why there's value in paying for those things. And so let's do it the way that they might do it. And so, like, credit to him is, but our first sales guy, he scraped manually.
Mhm.
You would go to website, find contact information, search Google, LinkedIn, blah blah blah. Yeah, this like spreadsheet, and just put it in there, and then we would email these people. And we started speaking with them. Of the first few were a complete disaster, of course. And then we found some folks who, like, we refined the pitch to a point where it was just very short. It was very much about value. Very few words on the page,
Yeah.
and it started resonating, right? And that's when we were like, okay, like this is what it feels like to sell
Mhm.
well, right? Like this is a good feeling. Yeah, and we just really leaned into that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's dig into that, the message, real quick, because I know we got 20 minutes here. Um, and I have some more questions I want to ask around this. But when it comes to refining your message and truncating and creating a concise message, walk us through a bit of you all's thought process and iteration through that. Where did you start? What did you assume that your message should be? And then why did you iterate? And then where did you end up?
Yeah, we started by putting the things on the page that were important to us, right?
Mhm.
Like, as a data person, I'm very driven by data, right? And so when I see a statistic, I'm like, that statistic means something to me,
Mhm.
because I have a reference on how to interpret it and what and all of these other things. Um, it's not the case with the in general. Like, nobody cares. Sure, I have 80% turnover. That number, first of all, like, it hurts to even hear. I experience it every day. I'm hiring these people, and it's making me feel like I have an adversarial relationship with people that I'm bringing onto my team. The most important people in the company is your team, right? Like, no team, no company. And I have this weird adversarial relationship with them because I'm looking at them and I'm cynical and I'm like, you'll probably be here for 2 months, so whatever. Yeah. Uh, and we that's kind of how we started. Is we would talk about the statistics and say, hey, look at all this, blah, blah, blah. And you just end up making people feel bad,
Mm.
which is the opposite of why we exist, right? We create happiness. Like, that's a very important component of what we do. Our product creates happiness first. Um, and so we changed our tune, right? And so removing as much statistics that as possible from the thing. Really leaving only the very, very relevant ones, and after giving it context and saying, look, we understand that you are doing everything you can. You're
Mm.
trying to run your small business in a certain way. You're dealing with all of these things. On top of that, you're not trained to run a business. You're really good at this really, like, hard thing, right? Like, you've gone to school to study how to be some kind of psychologist, and you can't. Running your business is getting in the way, right? You're experiencing such hardship. You feel like you don't know what you're doing. Um, here's a couple of ways where you can, like, you might think about it, right? So it was like, oh, this is interesting. It doesn't make me feel like bad. Everybody's in the same boat. It's very common that you know the best lawyers aren't necessarily the best lawyers, right? Like, they might be really good at law, but if they can't run a law practice, then they're just not going to have success. um, that's as an example, right? Like, you see this a lot in professional services. And so by helping them think about how to think about, like, how to test their business or maybe run their business a little bit differently, we were able to really resonate with them on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And then they liked us. And then they said, okay, you know what, we'll try it. And we said, by the way, it's going to cost you some money.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, how much? And we're like, this much. And they're like, okay. And we're like, shit, maybe
Thanks, man.
maybe we should have asked for more.
Exactly. That's a good feeling to have.
Yeah. Uh, so, like, nobody, like, yeah, I think maybe there've been a very small handful of people who've pushed back on price.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
That's
but
huge,
we
though.
don't give any discounts, so.
Discounts. And congratulations, first off, for that fact, right? You have created something valuable, and that's huge. And the story you just told is the story that a lot of salespeople and business owners go through. First, they start with logic. They're like, well, what's the logical reason someone should buy my products? Well, you're losing all of this. You're losing this. You're doing this. Statistics say this. And that brings their brain to a point to make a logical decision, which is not how people make decisions and make them emotionally,
Yeah.
right? And then as you started defining or going through your second pitch, your refined pitch, you said, I wanted to make them feel this, and I wanted to bring out this feeling, and then you really played an advisory role after you got them into an emotional state. You said, hey, let's so this is a problem, it's a potential problem. This is who you are, what you're dealing with. A lot of people are like you. Here are some possibilities. Let's brainstorm some possibilities for success. Probably brought up dollar, and then boom, here's how much it's going to cost. Huge. I think that's
Yeah.
the huge.
Yeah. Obviously we've not completely figured it out, right? Like, but we've done it well enough, in a very, very focused part of businesses that we've reproduced that success in a way that's lasting,
Yeah,
which I
yeah.
think
50
is super,
clients is
super good.
good. You
Yeah.
you reproduced it, and that's good. Did you have to read any books, watch any videos to figure out how to correctly message and
Okay, I'll tell you the biggest mistake I made first
Okay.
was following VCs on Twitter.
Don't do that.
What a bunch of bullshit. Let me just tell you.
They don't
It
know.
is all it's all just like it's all pontification without, in many instances, without any substance.
Mhm.
And in the instance where, and I'm not saying anybody's trying to mislead anyone intentionally, right? I think everybody has the right intention. It's just not good advice. And sometimes you find that somebody, yeah, like somebody, even folks who have been operators in the past, they've lost touch with what it meant, or how it is now, right? Like how you sold 20 years ago or 10 years ago even is very different from how you sell now. Um, so yeah, that was the biggest mistake I made. The book that I think that has made the biggest difference for me from a startup sales perspective is called Founding Sales.
Okay.
Uh, Pete, I'm going to mess up his last name, so I'm not going to even say. But
Okay.
if you look for Founding Sales online, you'll find it's free. It's available freely. Like, you can read it online, and then you can buy a copy if you want as well.
Okay. That's incredible that they offer it for free, right?
Yeah.
And that's
It's a
enough.
What a resource, dude. It's wonderful. And it goes from zero. It's like you have nothing, you have never sold. Here's how to think about. And then as you grow, it goes all the way from your first sale all the way to scale.
Yeah, because one of the issues that we see a lot of founders make is they raise money and then they go hire someone who was in enterprise sales at some huge company who's got some great title, right? Who's used to having systems and structure and a couple customers at least to go and sell and create a message for and bring customers in, and it just doesn't work because they're not used to starting with zero and getting to one. That's very, very hard to do. So that's awesome. And you did mention something about your story. You said that you hired someone at the beginning to help you out with sales while you probably built the product and also continued to help with sales. How did that sales hire go?
It was not a traditional sales hire, right? Like, this is somebody who was on the founding team.
Okay.
I had known him for a long time. We were close friends.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I he I think, like, he sold really well, right? Like, no doubt about that. I think, but it was just like he was used to selling in a very different place, in a very different process. Um, and we just had a hard time because, like, from my own perspective, is like, as a product person, it's like, I've built it, you go figure out how to sell it. Or like, we had this mismatch, right? Like, or even in terms of like um teamwork in the sale, right? Like, as a founder, I'm like really, really involved. I'm very, very particular, like down to the details about like how this thing should work, including the sale, how we talk about it, how we make people feel. And there was a good amount of disagreement between us on how that works or how it should work, etc. And so neither of us were happy. And unfortunately, like, the most important thing about that was that it was impacting our personal relationship, because we had one before this company existed, right? And so um, yeah, that was a hard decision, to stop the professional relationship for the sake of the personal one. And I'm still hopeful that, in the coming years we can recover to where we used to be. And so
Mhm.
then I took most of the effort on myself, and really started driving that sales process, doing the whole thing, from 0 to 1, like lead gen, outreach, creating the templates, understanding, failing, hearing the no's, whatever.
Right.
Uh,
Was this
and
while
I'm very, very
developing?
sorry.
Was this while you were
Oh
still
yeah, man,
developing?
all hats, wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
Uh, Very, very proud though. We have just hired our first VP of sales,
Nice.
and just like you said, man, right? Like, I think when you're a founder at this stage where you have some customers, you're trying to scale, you're trying to grow, you're trying to do things, there's a lot of temptation to go and hire that enterprise person, right? Or somebody who's got like a lot of experience. And typically that person is a different place in their lives where they don't want to do that kind of work that got them to where they are today, right?
Mm.
And then your other option is somebody who just has the right attitude, who's never done it before, but they're willing to learn, right? And you just figure it out together.
Mhm.
So it's not the best two options, right? Like both of them have their challenges, right? Obviously, like you want somebody who's willing to learn and try things, grow. It takes time, nobody, and different people learn in different ways.
Mhm.
And then on the other side, if you hire somebody, like, it's already very expensive, those people don't come cheap. And so I thought that somebody who can roll up their sleeves, do the dirty work, but has the experience to support strategy, is a unicorn. Like, they don't exist. We got very lucky, man. We found one. We have a VP of sales with 21 years experience, going from 0 to 1, scaled several startups from, 0 to several million in revenue, in some cases a lot more than that.
Mhm.
And this guy loves rolling his sleeves up and getting dirty, so I have to pinch myself.
That's incredible, man. You found the perfect hire for the role. Someone who's done
I
it
think so.
before and who's
Yeah.
addicted to doing that, which is incredible.
He
So
just started, man. It's been 10 days.
okay, well, we'll be praying it continues. He can put you guys to a $1 million company as well.
I'm
Uh,
confident.
okay, so we talked about 0 to 3. And you mentioned that you were at 50 right now, customers. Talk to us about how you either created processes and systems to ramp up to the 50, and just walk us through the sales strategy you all use to continue to pull in more customers.
So until, maybe the last quarter of last year, there wasn't a good way to build a good process. And the reason is that there was so much uncertainty around student loan forgiveness.
Okay.
And there was all kinds of different value of perceived value, right? Or like perceptions around what a student loan benefit was going to do. A lot of
Mhm.
employers were like, you know what, like I 100% see the value that you're bringing to the table here, but if forgiveness passes in 3 months, then what? You know, a
Yeah.
lot of individuals, people with the student loans, were like, my loans are going to be forgiven. I'm not interested. Even if my company offers it, I'm not signing up, because that's just a waste of money, right? I'm a good person. I don't want anybody to waste money. And so we had to do all of these very different things, right? Like, use very different strategies and tactics.
The message you're
Right.
valuing.
And it doesn't work in a normal world, right?
Mhm.
And so after forgiveness was is not on the table anymore, that has changed things for us in a significant way. So we are now actually like having a little bit more of a formal process. We've taken, guess how many templates we have? Email templates.
I'm gonna say 80. How much?
We have 8,000.
No, I wasn't
We
gonna
have
say.
tried so many freaking things, right? We have
That's
like
what it takes. 80,000. I said 80. 8,000. Oh,
yeah, so
wow.
we've tried a lot of different things, because it wasn't I'm not going to say the goalpost was shifting, but the environment was shifting a lot, right?
Mm,
The field you were playing on was very different from
yeah.
month to month. 1 month it would be like, wow, so that doesn't lend itself well to building a good process, or to have a playbook that says, hey, this is a playbook that I know it's going to work.
Right.
Let's go get after it, right? But now we're in a world where that's actually very possible, and we're seeing that happen. Like people we spoke to 2 years ago are coming up and saying, "Hey, do you remember me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I remember you. I missed you. How are you doing?" You know, like, so so we're at a place where we can actually justify that VP sales hire,
Hmm.
and somebody like who can come in and build that process. Uh, so yeah, it's not I think the best answer, maybe the answer you were looking for, but
No, I think that was powerful because it helps some of the people listening understands that the environment and what's going on in the world really impacts sales strategy and your message, right? Because you were put in an unfortunate position where student loans, the value of it was going every which way, right? And you can't build a process and a sustainable message and sustainable email templates if that's possible. But also, you're showing us that it takes grit, and you were trying to figure it out. You didn't just give up. You were just like, okay, let me wait for 3 months and let this thing settle. Every time something happened, every time a new news article came out, you were like, okay, how do I use this news article, use this new insight to create an email template, which is what it takes to be a good salesperson.
yeah,
So,
that's you described it to the team, man. Like it was like, okay, what's happening in the world right now? What do people care about, and how do we fit in this picture?
mhm.
And sometimes it's like, okay, this is not we don't fit in this picture.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then when it came to the medium in which you were conveying your message, was it email? Was it cold call? Was it LinkedIn? Was it a combination of both? Walk us through if there's a strategy there.
We have stuck very religiously to email from the beginning, right? There's so many things I think. Maybe we should have done cold calls earlier,
Okay.
but we have stuck to email, and all of our customers have been strangers, right? We didn't come into a world where we had a network or that we knew people that would give us a shot, whatever. Like these people met a stranger, and that stranger told them about this new thing, and they said, "Okay, let's do it." And then they were paying us, And so, from that perspective, it was very hard because we had to literally start from zero.
Yeah. And
Um,
hard medium. There's a lot of noise on email.
Lots of noise on email. You have to make the right subject. You have to do things, and then you have a lot of incentive to do the wrong thing, right? Like there's all of these like bad practices. You have to make a clickbaity subject line, or make a clickbaity body. Like then there's all kinds of people tell you like don't write more than 100 words. Other tell you like to write 1,000 words. Blah blah. Put video in it. And there's so much like stuff out there. Um, and I think that if anything, if it's helpful to others, like the one thing I've learned is that it doesn't matter. All of that stuff works. For one situation or the other. But what really matters is that have the faith that what what your how you can make a big difference to somebody, and really lean into that. And so that's what we've done.
Mhm.
That has produced success for us.
Yeah. When you're dealing with multiple different industries, there's no golden ticket, no silver bullet message that will
Yeah.
resonate on,
Yeah,
right?
and so like in our situation, even developing that ideal customer profile was very difficult because
Right.
of the environment. It was changing a lot, and so we were just like, hey, like we're just trying to sell and continue to show that we can continue to sell in this environment.
Hmm.
Now we are adjusting our processes where we're like being a lot more intentional about where we're selling, right? So we do have an ideal customer profile now,
Hmm.
and obviously that's going to change over time, but it feels very different having done this for the last 3.5 years through the crazy environment. It almost feels easy now.
That's good. Or you're just used to the pain, which is
Yeah. Yeah, the pain is just the side, it's just there. Yeah.
used. Okay, and we're going back on this question, but when you first started, Dollar, you didn't have a target niche, and you were probably just selling everybody. You're like, hey, you're a small business, or hey, you have employees. Would you be interested in student loans? Tell us a little bit about the importance of finding a niche and any other insights or wisdom you have around a niche when it comes to sales and building a good business in general.
So I've through the last few years I've learned a lot of these things. I'm allergic to a lot of these words, right? So for niche, and I think it's not because of the word itself. I think it's how it's construed. Like when people say niche, like a lot of the times, the first thing that folks think about is a very particular subset of a very particular industry, blah, blah, blah. And that's not necessarily the case, right? A niche is anyone who fits a particular set of criteria. And so, from the beginning, we've had a good idea, right? We just didn't want to go and talk to anybody. We wanted to talk to people that would, first of all, like who had the highest incentive to speak with us. And so we started with folks who we knew hired a lot of people with student loans.
Okay.
And we from there you refine. You say where am I having more success? Where am I having less success? It's been a mess, right? And so now we're going back to all of those 8,000 emails, 8,000 templates, and going through them in a methodical way and saying, okay, like what can we? Was this a desperate email and should we just delete it forever, or was there something here that we can use to refine our process?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. And then I know the answer to this, but I want to ask to see if there's any good nuggets here. Marketing or sales? What should a startup focus on?
Yeah, marketing doesn't exist, man. I mean,
Yeah.
look, don't get me wrong. Like, so marketing, I think a lot of what marketing does is awareness, right? Like, and
Brand awareness.
you raise awareness by having a very clear and concise message to a very particular audience, and like that's how you market well. Marketing doesn't mean spending a ton of money on ads and like this and that, right? And so the most important thing that marketing needs, if you want to have successful marketing, is to have that clear and concise message.
Mm-hmm.
Or have somebody who can take everything that you've done and say, here's actually the clear and concise message to this particular audience, blah, blah, blah. And at the early stage of the startup, you're not marketing, you're selling, right? Like you need to develop what that message is, and you're not going to develop what that message is until you speak to people and they tell you no, they tell you maybe, they tell you yes, and then you never hear from them again. Like you have to experience it and say like, and nobody's ever doing anything wrong, right? Like nobody is being mean or whatever. Like they're communicating to you that what you've done, what you've told me is not important enough, or it's
Mm-hmm.
not painful enough for me to act, or I would love to, but I don't have money. They're
Mm-hmm.
telling you all of these things in very interesting ways. I'll stop there. I've been going off in tangents here.
I really like that last statement because it shows your mindset. That's a no excuses mindset. That's hey, you're totally fine. You're telling me, you said you're telling me something about my product in a very interesting way. You're not just being mean or anything. You're just giving me the truth of the value of my product, right? In the way you're conveying that. So I really like that mindset, which is huge. And you've been doing good, man. But I want to go on to our final two questions, which are, what advice would you give a new technical founder as they start thinking about how to bring in customers?
Nobody cares, man. Like nobody cares how shiny your tech is or what stack you're using or how freaking awesome it is. They only care about what, and I'm being very extreme in my words, right? But people have a lot going on. And so if you want to sell something, you have to remove yourself from the picture and you have to start with them always. But like, why would they buy the thing? Why do they actually need it? Right? Not everybody needs the thing, right? And so I think that's the biggest piece of advice I would say is that just focus on them.
Mm-hmm. Huge. And what does it take to be good at sales?
It's really a mindset, man. That's all it is. I think like there's no secret to what constitutes a good salesperson. Like from the beginning of time, we know how to sell, right? Like human beings naturally, like we're born selling, right? Like so we this I guess the what it takes is to be able to repeat, be consistent, uh trust yourself. You're gonna hear like it's very, very normal. Nobody hates you. Like people will say no, people will not respond, people will ghost you, and all of these things. And it's not got anything to do with you. It's mostly got things to do with them, where they are in life, whether or not what you said was important enough to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just about being consistent because everybody like there's like selling is not a secret. Like it's like everybody knows how to sell. It's very easy to look up like what does it take to sell. Like you have something to sell, you go tell somebody, do you want this thing? And they say yes. You figure out a price, you buy it, right?
Right.
But I think having that consistent attitude and never ever 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 in your life ever think badly about a prospect or a customer. Never diminish them. Never say that person's an idiot or that person doesn't get it or whatever because you've got something to learn from that.
Yep.
Like they're a human being.
That's huge. All right. Appreciate all the insights that you've been able to give us on this podcast. What's next for you as you continue your journey?
Man, dollar for me is like, I think it's just finding other ways, more and more ways to get people additional dollar bills, and charge them to a path of building wealth, right? So accelerate them to zero student debt and build so they can build wealth, and that's all really I focus on. That's what's next for me, is making people happier,
Yes.
making the experience better, and so that's what I think about. What happens, that's professional. Personally, it's just been incredible watching my son grow. He's 2 years old, and I think every day I'm excited to see what he's going to do. What he's
Yes.
going to say, how he's going to grow, and so that's been special for me.
That's incredible. Okay. Well, how can people get a hold of you and see your content and see you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so Naveed Iqbal, on LinkedIn. I accept all requests. I don't discriminate. It's helpful if you say something useful. you know, we're at the time where asking for time right now is probably not the best. I'll do my best to meet with everybody I can with. It's just it may be a month before we can get together, but still, reach out. I'd love to connect. And then we have our website, getdollar.com, getdolr.com, that has a lot about what we do and how we do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Naveed. It was great having you, listening to your insights and your mindset as you go through sales. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day here.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for having me over and for letting me rant.
Of course.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
Cheers, man.